Have your container perennials started looking tired, stretched, or overcrowded even though they are still alive and growing? Maybe the flowers have faded, the stems are leaning, or the foliage at the bottom of the pot is looking yellow, brown, or ragged. Here's the important part. Container perennials often need more intentional pruning than the same plants growing in the ground. Their roots are confined to a limited amount of soil, so you want the growth above the soil to remain balanced, healthy, and manageable. Today we're going through 11 container perennials that can benefit from pruning right now, including exactly what to remove, where to make the cut, and what you should leave completely alone. Because pruning isn't simply about making a plant look smaller. The right cut can encourage fresh growth, improve the shape of the plant, and keep a container from becoming dominated by weak, floppy, or exhausted growth. But the wrong cut can remove healthy growth that the plant still needs. And number 1 is especially important because regular, careful pruning can help prevent a beautiful container lavender from gradually becoming woody, open, and sparse. Welcome back to the channel. Today we are covering Prune These 11 Container Perennials now. But before we dive in, I have a major announcement. The Plant Once Garden is officially live. It is approximately 150 pages gathered into one complete downloadable reference, designed with a hand-drawn heritage cover and warm cream pages that look and feel like a guide your grandmother would have owned. Inside, you'll find the 90 perennial plants that come back every year with almost no labor, 6 complete garden plans, the no-labor planting calendar, and the hydrogen peroxide method explained completely. I've also included the specific perennials that bring hummingbirds singing and dancing right outside your window. I deliberately made this a digital guide because I wanted to save you real money. When you're making an investment in a guide like this, the last thing you want is for a physical book to get ruined by water and mud in the yard. With this soft copy, you are completely protected. You can open it right on your phone or tablet anywhere you go, especially when you're out shopping for new flowers. Or print out just a single slice of the book to take outside with you. If that single page gets filthy or lost, your master copy stays permanently safe. You can scan the QR code on your screen right now, or click the link in the pinned comment or description below to get your copy today. Now, back to the garden. Number 11. Russian Sage. Let's start with Russian Sage. Russian Sage is a beautiful container perennial because of its airy growth, silvery foliage, and delicate purple-blue flowers. When it is standing upright and flowering well, it can make even a simple patio container look carefully designed. The problem starts when the top growth becomes too long and heavy. Instead of staying upright, the stems begin leaning outward. Some may flop over the edge of the container, while others may spread farther than the pot can comfortably support. That is your signal to consider a light-shaping prune. The important word here is light. Do not cut Russian sage down aggressively simply because it has become a little untidy. And don't try to turn it into a perfectly rounded hedge. Start by stepping back and looking at the entire plant. Which stems are extending too far? Which ones are leaning? Which parts are making the container look unbalanced? Those are the stems to target. Selectively shorten the overgrown stems, making your cuts just above a healthy set of leaves or a point where new branching can develop. You're essentially editing the plant. You're keeping the attractive open structure while removing the growth that has become too long or unstable. This matters particularly in containers because the plant is growing from a much smaller root zone than it would have in an open garden bed. If the top becomes excessively large, the container can become visually and physically unbalanced. One side may become heavier. Stems can lean outward. Wind and rain can push the plant even farther over the edge. A light trim helps keep the growth proportional to the container. But don't remove all of those elegant stems. Russian sage is naturally airy. That openness is part of its character. You want to preserve the loose, graceful shape rather than creating a dense ball of foliage. So remove the obvious overgrowth, shorten unstable stems, and then stop. If your Russian sage is already upright, healthy, and flowering beautifully, there is no reason to prune simply because it appears on this list. The goal is not maximum pruning. The goal is better structure. And that brings us to a plant where the flower stalks themselves are often the first thing that needs attention. Number 10. Hostas. Hostas are grown primarily for their foliage, and in a container, that foliage can become the entire centerpiece. Large leaves spill outward from the crown and create that lush, full appearance gardeners love. But hostas also send up tall flowerscapes. Once those flowers have finished, the stalks can become visually distracting, especially when they begin turning brown. If the flowerscapes are spent, follow each stalk down toward the base of the plant. Then cut the spent scape as close to the crown as you reasonably can without damaging the surrounding foliage. That's the main pruning job for the hosta. And there's an important distinction here. Do not give the hosta a haircut. Those large green leaves may look excessive, but healthy leaves are still working for the plant. They are producing energy and supporting the plant's continued growth. So don't remove healthy leaves simply because they are large or because you want the plant to look smaller. Instead, look for leaves that are genuinely damaged. A leaf that has turned badly yellow, collapsed, become severely torn, or looks unhealthy can be removed at the base. But a healthy green leaf should stay. This is particularly important when the plant is still actively growing because you want to preserve as much healthy foliage as possible. So with hostas, think selective cleanup. Remove the finished flowerscapes. Remove leaves that are truly damaged. Leave the healthy canopy alone. The result is a cleaner container without sacrificing the foliage that makes the hosta attractive in the first place. And now we're moving to a perennial where the spent flowers can cause the entire plant to start looking loose and untidy. Number 9. Yarrow. Yarrow can look spectacular when it is covered in flowers, but once those flower heads fade, the plant can become much less controlled, especially inside a container. The stems begin spreading outward, the flower heads turn brown, and the plant can start looking as though it is trying to escape the pot. This is where deadheading becomes useful. Take a faded flower head and follow its stem downward. Instead of automatically cutting every stem at the same height, find the point where that flower-bearing stem connects with healthy foliage or a strong branching point. Make your cut there. This removes the finished flower while helping preserve a natural shape. It also prevents long, unsupported stems from dominating the container. If your yarrow has become especially floppy, work with individual stems. Don't simply cut the entire plant across the top like you're trimming a hedge. That can leave you with an artificial-looking flat surface. Instead, shorten the individual stems that have become too long, following them back toward healthy foliage. This gives the plant a more natural appearance while reducing the outward spread. And you don't necessarily have to remove every flower head. If you enjoy the dried seed structure or want to leave some resources for wildlife, you can allow selected flower heads to remain. The purpose of pruning is to bring the plant back into proportion with its container and remove growth that has clearly finished or become problematic. So look at the plant first. Then make the cuts that solve the problem, rather than removing everything simply because it isn't perfectly neat. And next, we're moving to one of the most familiar summer flowers on this list. Number 8. Black-eyed Susan. Black-eyed Susan can continue producing flowers for an extended period when spent blooms are removed regularly. But in a container, old flower stems can quickly become noticeable. A flower opens. The yellow petals eventually fade. The dark center remains. Then another flower does the same thing. Eventually, you can have several brown seed heads standing above otherwise healthy foliage. Those seed heads aren't necessarily bad. In fact, they can have value for wildlife. But if your goal is to encourage continued flowering and maintain a neat container display, deadheading is extremely useful. Find the flower that has finished. Follow its stem downward. Then make your cut at a healthy stem node or just above a strong set of foliage. The key is to avoid leaving a long, bare stem sticking above the plant. You're removing the finished flower, not destroying the entire stem system. And don't cut through healthy foliage unnecessarily. The leaves still have an important job to do. So use a simple rule. Finished flower, remove it. Healthy leaf, keep it. Healthy, productive stem, leave it unless it needs shaping. That keeps your pruning selective. If you have several black-eyed Susans in containers, this can become a very quick maintenance routine. Walk past the pots, identify the flowers that have clearly finished, and remove those individual blooms. You don't have to wait until the entire plant looks messy. A few minutes of selective deadheading can keep the container looking fresh while encouraging the plant to continue producing new flowers. And now we're moving to a plant where the pruning cut can be much more substantial. Number 7. Coreopsis. Coreopsis is a fantastic container perennial because of its bright flowers and fine, delicate foliage. But after the main bloom cycle, some varieties can become stretched and leggy. The stems become longer. The center opens up, and instead of a compact plant, you have growth spreading in several directions. This is when a stronger cutback can help. If your coreopsis has genuinely become leggy after its main flowering cycle, reduce those overgrown stems by roughly half. But timing matters. Do not take a coreopsis covered in fresh flowers and cut the entire plant in half simply because you heard that pruning can be beneficial. Wait until the main flowering cycle has finished, or the plant has clearly become overgrown. Then make your cuts above healthy foliage or strong branching points. Focus on the long, weak, stretched stems. You don't have to remove every bit of growth. The goal is to reduce the overgrown structure and encourage the plant to rebuild with a more compact shape. And that compact shape is particularly valuable in a container. A plant that fits its pot is easier to manage. It is less likely to flop over the rim. It is less likely to become tangled with neighboring containers. And it looks much more intentional. Think about the container as part of the plant's design. A coreopsis that would have plenty of room to spread in a garden bed may need more attention when it is growing inside a relatively small pot. So prune for the container you actually have. After you've made your cuts, don't immediately start taking more. Step back. Check the overall shape. If the major leggy stems are gone and the plant is balanced, you're finished. The purpose of this cut is not to make the plant as small as possible. It's to remove stretched growth and give the plant an opportunity to develop a stronger, more compact structure. And now we move to one of the most popular perennial flowers for containers. Number 6. Coneflower. Coneflower, or echinacea, can become a spectacular focal point in a container. Its flowers rise above the foliage, and those distinctive central cones add structure and interest. But eventually, individual flowers finish. When that happens, you have two legitimate choices. You can leave some of the seed heads for wildlife and later season interest. Or, if your priority is continued flowering and a cleaner container, you can deadhead the spent flowers. Find the finished flower. Follow its stem downward. Then cut it back to the nearest healthy leaf set or strong branching point. That removes the exhausted flower without unnecessarily removing productive growth. And there's no need to strip the entire plant simply because some flowers have faded. Look at each flower individually. If it is finished and you want another bloom, remove it. If another flower is still attractive and actively contributing to the display, leave it. And if you're nearing the end of the season and want seed heads for birds, leave selected flowers standing. The important thing is understanding the purpose behind the cut. You are not pruning echinacea simply because brown flower heads exist. You are choosing what outcome you want. More flowers? Deadhead. Wildlife value and seed heads? Leave some. Cleaner appearance? Remove the most exhausted flowers. And avoid cutting healthy green leaves unnecessarily. This is one of those plants where selective pruning is much more useful than aggressive pruning. You want to remove what is finished while preserving the healthy foliage and stems that are still contributing to the plant. That brings us to a plant where removing spent flower spikes can encourage another round of color. Number 5. Salvia. Salvia is one of the best examples of why regular deadheading can make a container look dramatically more productive. You get tall flower spikes. They open. Pollinators arrive. The color is beautiful. Then those flowers begin to fade. Instead of allowing the finished spikes to remain until the entire plant looks exhausted, remove them as they finish. Take your pruners and follow the faded flower spike downward. Look for the next healthy set of leaves. Then make your cut just above that leaf joint. That's the important part. You're not simply clipping off the brown flower. You're removing the finished spike down to a point where the plant can produce fresh growth. And you don't need to wait until every flower spike has faded. You can treat this as routine maintenance. You walk past the container. You notice a spike is finished. You cut it. Then a few days later, you notice another. You remove it. This prevents old flower growth from accumulating above the plant. It also keeps the container looking fresher because the viewer sees active flowers and developing growth instead of a collection of exhausted spikes. When salvia is growing in a container, this matters even more because the plant needs to remain proportionate to the pot. You want strong flower spikes emerging from a healthy base. You don't want a collection of bare stems leaning outward over the rim. So follow the faded spike down to the healthy leaf joint and make the cut there. Then leave the healthy foliage alone. That simple habit can make a noticeable difference in the appearance and productivity of the plant. By the way, if you're looking to completely transform your yard into a low-maintenance paradise, don't forget that my full 150-page guide, The Plant Once Garden, is available right now. We specifically created this as a digital guide to protect your investment from getting ruined by garden mud or water. You can take it anywhere on your phone while plant shopping, or print out a single slice of the book to take into the dirt. Scan the QR code right here on the screen, or find the link in the pinned comment below to get your copy today. Now, let's get right back into today's topic. And next, we're dealing with a perennial, where pruning is much more selective. Number 4. Coral bells. Coral bells, or heuchera, are different from several of the plants we've already covered. With heuchera, the foliage is the star, so you don't want to make large, unnecessary cuts across the plant. Instead, look underneath and around the outside of the container. You'll often find older leaves that have become discolored, dried, torn, or collapsed against the soil. Those are the leaves to remove. Reach toward the base of the damaged leaf stem and cut it cleanly. Don't yank at the crown. Don't pull aggressively. And don't remove healthy leaves simply because they're older. The objective is to clear away foliage that is no longer contributing and make room around the center of the plant. That can also improve the overall appearance of the container because you won't have a layer of damaged leaves sitting around the crown. Look carefully. One leaf is badly tattered. Remove it. Another leaf is completely dried. Remove it. A healthy green leaf is sitting right beside them. Leave it. That's the approach. You are performing selective cleanup rather than cutting the plant back. And this is an important distinction for container gardeners. Pruning does not always mean reducing height. Sometimes it means removing individual pieces that have become damaged, discolored, or exhausted. With coral bells, less is often more. Protect the healthy rosette. Clear away the damaged lower foliage. Keep the center open enough for new leaves to emerge. And avoid turning a beautiful full plant into a sparse one simply because you wanted to make it look cleaner. Now we're moving to a plant that is much more forgiving when it comes to removing old, leggy growth. Number 3. Sedum, or stonecrop, is a reliable container perennial with thick foliage and distinctive flower heads. But as the season progresses, some sedums can become leggy. Older stems stretch, flower heads fade, and the plant loses the dense, compact appearance that made it attractive earlier in the season. That's when pruning can help. Start with the obvious problems. Remove dead flower heads. Then identify stems that have become excessively long, weak, or awkwardly positioned. Shorten those stems to maintain a compact shape. You don't need to cut every stem. Selective pruning usually produces a better result because it allows you to preserve the strongest growth while correcting the areas that have become overgrown. Look at the plant. Find the stem that is leaning too far. Make the cut. Find the next one. Decide whether it actually needs shortening. Then stop and look again. The goal is balance. A container of sedum can look especially attractive when the growth forms a dense, controlled mound, but much less attractive when individual stems are leaning in every direction. So don't approach this as a race to remove as much as possible. You're improving the structure. Remove the dead flower heads. Shorten the obvious leggy stems. Keep the strong, healthy growth. Then reassess. And if your sedum is already compact, healthy, and flowering beautifully, you may only need to remove a few exhausted flower heads. There's no prize for pruning a healthy plant more aggressively. Use the pruners when they solve a problem. Now we're down to the final two. And number 2 is one of the most rewarding perennials to cut back after its first major flush of flowers. Number 2. Catmint. Catmint, or nepeta, is famous for creating that soft, flowering mound that pollinators love. When it's in full bloom, the plant can look almost completely covered in flowers. But eventually, that first major flush begins to fade. The flower stems become tired, the mound opens up, and the whole plant can lose the fresh appearance it had earlier. That's when catmint responds especially well to a substantial cutback. Once the first major flowering flush has finished, shear back the spent growth significantly, leaving the healthy base and foliage needed for regrowth. This is not the same as lightly removing a few flower heads. Here, you're resetting the plant. Remove the old flower stems and much of the exhausted top growth. The result will be a much smaller plant immediately after pruning. That's expected. The important thing is that you're cutting at the appropriate stage after the major flowering flush has finished. Once the old growth is removed, give the plant time to respond. Fresh foliage can begin developing from the base, and under suitable growing conditions, that new growth can produce another wave of flowers. This is why catmint is such a satisfying plant to prune. The before and after difference can be dramatic. Before pruning, you may have a loose mound covered with fading flowers. Afterward, you have a compact base ready to rebuild. And because it is growing in a container, pay attention to moisture after pruning. You don't need to drown the plant, but don't allow the confined root system to remain excessively dry while fresh growth is developing. Check the soil and water appropriately for the conditions. Most importantly, don't judge the pruning job by what the plant looks like immediately afterward. The purpose is not to have the most beautiful plant 5 minutes after cutting. The purpose is to encourage the next stage of growth. And now we've reached number 1. This is the plant where careful pruning can make a major difference over time. Number 1. Lavender. Lavender earns the number 1 position because it is both incredibly beautiful in containers and particularly important to prune correctly. The fragrance, the silver foliage, the flowers, the upright architectural form. Lavender can make a container look elegant with very little effort. But there is one problem you need to stay ahead of: woodiness. As lavender ages, the base can become increasingly woody. Green growth may remain concentrated toward the outer ends, while the interior becomes bare and difficult to rejuvenate. If that happens repeatedly, the plant can become open, sparse, and less attractive. That's why timely pruning matters. When the flowers have finished, begin by removing the spent flower stems. Then look carefully at the current green growth. You can trim back some of that green growth to maintain a compact shape, but the key is to stay within the productive portion of the plant whenever possible. A moderate cutback of up to roughly 1/3 of the green growth, when appropriate, can help maintain shape and encourage a more compact appearance. But do not simply hack the entire plant back into old, bare brown wood. That is where inexperienced pruning can create problems. Look for green, leafy stems. Make your cuts there. The goal is to maintain young, productive growth and prevent the plant from becoming a giant woody framework with only a few green shoots at the ends. And don't feel that you need to make the maximum cut simply because 1/3 is possible. Start conservatively. Remove the spent flower stems. Shape the green growth. Step back. Look at the plant from several angles. Then decide whether another small cut is actually necessary. Remember, once a branch has been removed, you cannot put it back. So thoughtful pruning is much safer than aggressive pruning. And container lavender especially benefits from maintaining a balanced structure. The pot limits the root system, so keeping the above-ground growth reasonably controlled helps the plant remain manageable. A compact lavender is less likely to flop over the container. It is easier to maintain, and it retains that neat architectural form that makes lavender so attractive. If your lavender is already heavily woody and sparse, don't expect one pruning session to completely reverse years of growth. The better approach is to prevent further deterioration and maintain healthy green growth consistently over time. That is the real secret. Pruning isn't one dramatic rescue operation. It is a series of small corrections made at the right moment. And once you understand that, these 11 container perennials become much easier to manage. The most important thing to remember: before you put the pruners away, remember this: never prune simply because a plant looks untidy. First, identify what you're actually removing. Is it a finished flower, damaged foliage, a weak or excessively long stem? Or is it healthy green growth that simply doesn't look the way you want? Those are very different situations. Finished flowers can often be deadheaded. Damaged foliage can often be removed. Overgrown stems can often be shortened. But healthy green foliage is still valuable. So don't turn pruning into a contest to see how small you can make the plant. The goal is healthy, manageable growth. That is especially important with container plants because their root systems are restricted. You want the top of the plant and the root system to remain reasonably balanced, and you also want the plant to fit the container instead of constantly fighting against it. That's why the best pruning is usually selective. Remove what has finished, correct what has become excessive, protect what is healthy. Then stop, and once you've finished, give the plant time to respond. The results may not be immediate, but over the following days and weeks, you may begin seeing fresh shoots, new foliage, developing buds, and a much tighter overall shape. That's what you're working toward. Not simply a cleaner-looking plant today, a healthier-looking plant tomorrow. What to do next? If you have several containers, don't try to prune every plant at once. Start with the obvious ones. Walk around your patio, deck, porch, or balcony and inspect each container. Look at the flowers first. Which ones have clearly finished? Then look at the stems. Which ones are excessively long? Which ones are leaning or flopping? Then, look at the foliage. Which leaves are damaged, dried, discolored, or completely collapsed? Those are your first targets. Before you begin, grab a clean pair of sharp pruners. A clean, sharp blade gives you much better control than a dull blade that crushes or tears the stem. Then work slowly. Remove the obvious finished growth first. Don't start by cutting everything you can reach. Make the first few cuts. Step back. Look at the container. Then decide what needs to happen next. This is especially important with container plants because you can see them from almost every direction. In a garden bed, an awkward stem may disappear behind another plant. In a container, the entire shape is exposed. So think about balance. Is one side much heavier? Is a stem hanging over the rim? Has the center become crowded? Does the plant still have enough healthy foliage? Those observations should guide your next cut. And once you're finished pruning, look down at the soil surface. Remove dead flowers, fallen leaves, and loose debris that accumulated during the pruning process. Keep the area around the crown reasonably clean. Then check the soil moisture. If the plant needs water, water it appropriately. If the soil is already moist, don't automatically add more. The plant still needs time to respond to the pruning. This is where patience becomes part of the process. You make the cut today. The plant doesn't instantly transform, but over the following days and weeks, the response becomes visible. Fresh foliage, new shoots, new buds, a tighter shape, a cleaner container. That's the real reason experienced gardeners prune. They're not simply reacting to what the plant looks like today. They're influencing what the plant can become next. And that's especially important with containers, because you're working with a limited amount of soil, limited root space, and a plant that needs to remain proportionate to its pot. Good pruning helps you manage that relationship. Final thought. So, if you have any of these 11 perennials growing in containers, take a few minutes this week to inspect them. Don't rush, don't cut blindly, and don't assume that more pruning is always better. Start with the finished flowers, then look for damaged foliage. Then identify stems that have become excessively long, weak, or floppy. Finally, consider the natural growth habit of the plant before making your cuts. Remember what each plant needs. Lavender needs careful shaping within the green growth to help prevent excessive woodiness. Catmint benefits from a stronger cutback after its first major flowering flush. Sedum responds to removing dead flower heads and correcting leggy stems. Salvia benefits from removing faded flower spikes down to healthy leaf joints. Coneflower can be deadheaded when you want to encourage continued blooms. Coreopsis can be reduced after the main bloom cycle when it has become leggy. Coral bells need selective removal of damaged and discolored leaves. Black-eyed Susan benefits from removing spent flowers while preserving healthy foliage. Yarrow can be brought back into proportion by trimming faded flower heads toward healthy foliage. Hostas need their spent flower scapes removed while healthy leaves remain untouched. And Russian sage benefits from light shaping when overgrown stems begin making the container unbalanced. 11 plants. 11 slightly different pruning jobs, but one common principle. Don't remove healthy growth just because you can. Remove what has finished. Correct what has become excessive. Protect what is still working. That is how you make container gardening easier, instead of turning pruning into another major chore. And this is also why you don't always need to buy another plant when an existing one starts looking tired. Sometimes the plant isn't finished. Sometimes it simply needs the old growth removed, so the healthy growth becomes visible again. A container perennial that looks tired today may not need fertilizer. It may not need to be replaced. It may not need to be thrown away. It may simply need the right cut at the right time. And once you learn to recognize that, your garden becomes much easier to manage. Low maintenance does not mean zero maintenance. It means doing the right job at the right time so you don't create 10 unnecessary jobs for yourself later. One dead-headed flower can encourage another wave of color. One removed damaged leaf can clean up the center of a plant. One shortened stem can prevent a perennial from flopping over the edge of its container. One careful pruning session can keep an attractive plant compact instead of allowing it to become tangled and difficult to manage. That's the goal, not doing more, doing less, but doing it at the right moment. So if you're standing beside your containers right now thinking, I have at least 3 of these plants, don't wait until they become completely overgrown. Take your pruners outside. Start with the easiest one. Find the obvious spent growth. Remove it carefully. Then stop and look. You may be surprised by how much healthier and cleaner the plant looks after only a few minutes. And remember, your container garden doesn't need to be perfect. It needs to be healthy, manageable, and enjoyable. That's the goal. If you're ready to stop wasting time on plants that die every winter, don't forget to download your copy of The Plant Once Garden. It's 150 pages of everything this channel teaches, completely mapped out for you. We chose to offer this as a soft copy to make sure you get the absolute most value for your money. A physical book out in the garden is just waiting to get ruined by mud, water, or dirty hands. With this format, you get maximum freedom and total peace of mind. Take it with you everywhere on your phone, or print just the exact page you need for the day's project. If that sheet gets muddy, your master copy remains 100% safe. You get lifetime access, total protection against damage, and a resource you can freely share with your friends, children, or grandchildren. Just scan the QR code on your screen right now, or click the link in the description below to get your copy today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.